Welcome to Off Watch, our weekly interview series. If you've been following the series, you'll know that we talked to Ian Walker, the winning skipper of the 2014 edition, and he told us a little story about a young British 23-year-old sailor who applied for an internship on an America's Cup program. And that person, Simon Fisher, since went on to navigate for Ian Walker in his winning ocean race campaign. So we thought it'd be a good idea to sit down with the man himself and let him tell his side of the story, plus get an insider view as to what it takes to be a great navigator. If you enjoy this interview, leave us a like. You can subscribe to our channel so we can let you know what more great interviews we've got coming up. But in the meantime, enjoy this. Simon Fisher has had a few positions on the scoreboard with his 5 laps of the planet, from chasing the pack to fighting for the front. But it was with apparent ease in 2015 that he won onboard Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing with a leg to spare. That victory, clearly a reward for years of hard work. But Simon is a sailor that seems to enjoy racing with his peers as much as those victories. In 2005, he said, "I'm lucky that the people that I looked up to and inspired me and helped me with my sailing career are now among my good friends." Simon, thank you very much for talking to me. That's kind of where I wanted to start, because I've been wanting to talk to you for a while, and you're a busy sailor, so it's been difficult to sort of pin you down. But one of the things that has done is I spoke to Ian Walker not long ago, and he told me a story that I'd never heard before about a young 23-year-old British sailor plucky enough to try out for an America's Cup team, back then GBR Challenge, and maybe it didn't quite go the way that young sailor wanted to, but it led on to something pretty good. Can you pick up that story for us?
Sure. I think I know what you're talking about. Obviously, the GBR Challenge was like the first British America Cup campaign, I think, since 86 or 87. So when it was all sort of happening in the UK and I had various friends there, I was obviously really excited to be, find a way to get involved. And I had a few cracks at it. I mean, I had a good friend of mine, Boise. He was sort of, kind of pushing my thing for helping him with the rigging. And then I was sailing with Chris Main a lot of the time on the 540 Warlord, he was our tactician and I was the boat captain. And I sort of pestered him a bit about see if he could get me in. And so by one way or another, I got a sort of trial in the summer when they were looking for new recruits. But I guess with no America's Cup experience, and I wasn't an Olympic medalist or Olympian or anything like that, then I was just sort of some random kid from Essex probably. But, it sort of didn't go quite the way I planned. But I know, I remember the trial well, and I remember the first day sailing on an America's Cup boat was quite a daunting experience. I remember sitting there by the primary wing, sort of waiting for everything to happen, and the mainsail went up past me, and the sail numbers were bigger than I was. So at this point, I've only ever sailed on like a 40-footer, or I'm not even sure if I'd sailed on a boat with a pedestal on it. So there was this like monster of a boat with 6 pedestals and all this going on. And I spent a few days hanging on the end of the jib sheet with a few mates of mine sort of poking me in the back, telling me what to look at and what to say. But no, it was a fantastic experience, and I learned a heap. And unfortunately, I wasn't straight into the team at that point. But after a good summer of sailing with a few other guys in GBR Challenge and a bit more pestering of Ian, he eventually cracked and got me down to New Zealand for a bit of a trial. And I started off sort of staying in the YMCA in Auckland, across the road from the team hotel, and just mucked in really. And I guess sort of the bulk of the main bit of my sailing career really kicked off there. And I'm really grateful for that opportunity, and really happy that I sort of stuck at it and pestered people until I got in.
What I find amazing about that is not so much you as a young sailor were prepared to go, look, I don't want to get paid. I'm just going to go. I'm going to make this happen for myself, because you do see those people doing that. And I can empathize with that. What I find amazing is it's Ian Walker that you're then navigating for in, twice on Abu Dhabi Ocean Racing, and then the one, the edition where you guys were victorious. Did it feel strange having to talk to somebody who you'd been, for want of a better term, begging for a chance to go and sail on these really cool boats, to now be saying, no, Ian, trust me, we need to be going left here? That sort of dynamic must have evolved quite abruptly over the years.
Yeah. I guess it's a nice story, really. He was like obviously the most senior team, the figure in the team with GBR, and I was obviously like one of the youngest guys, just sort of trying to get experience. But yeah, it's really nice that, over the years we've sort of sailed with each other quite a bit, and we obviously had the whole of the 11-12 campaign, and I actually came into that team just to sort of help out, and just in case Jules was going to get called away to the America's Cup as a sort of potential navigator. And then naturally, the cup kind of all blew up and turned into a deed of gifting, and Jules continued with the team as a navigator, and I sort of managed to, stayed on as a trimmer driver. So that was sort of, it was actually quite nice, and it was actually a great race. Did not have the responsibility of navigation, or being the navigator, but it kind of all sort of led into our campaign in the 65, where we were less crew, and there was a bit more emphasis on the navigator doing a bit more sailing and all that sort of stuff. It sort of was all sort of fitted in quite well towards that 65 campaign, which obviously had the result we wanted.
Let's talk about the navigation, because it would be quite tempting, I think, for a lot of people when they start getting onto some really cool boats. Like you mentioned being on board an old America's Cup Class 5 boat back in the day. Grab your winch handle, keep quiet, try and do your job, keep your head down, sort of thing. But being a navigator on a boat means standing tall, putting your arm up, giving your opinions, and taking an awful lot of responsibility. And your first ocean race, this was 2005-06, ABN AMRO 2. You're navigating on board that. Why were you seeking to be a navigator from word one?
No, I sort of ended up being a navigator a bit by accident, and actually sort of GBR Challenge was quite responsible for that. That's sort of my spot on the boat when we were training at GBR Challenge, when I started, was aft grinder. So I used to sit next to the navigator. So I'd sit next to Jules or Derek and be looking over their shoulder and asking questions. And I guess I've always been really sort of fascinated about what makes boats go fast, and all the performance information was sort of coming into the deck screen, and learning about how to evaluate performance and all that sort of stuff sort of triggered my interest, I guess. And then, as the team got busier and we had 2 boats and new boats, and Derek, who was our navigator, one of our navigators, and also the sort of head of the design team, got more and more busy with the new boat. So when we needed a navigator, I kind of stuck my hand up and said, yeah, I'll have a go on the B boat at GBR Challenge. And then after that, I just got more and more into navigating. I actually remember I sailed up with Cristobella. It was an IMS boat on the IMS circuit in Spain, and I remember the first season I did that, I got asked to sort of come and navigate, and everyone was like, well, why you got SiFi navigating? Isn't he a trimmer? And now if I go trim on a boat, everyone goes, oh, new navigators. I got into navigating sort of a bit by accident in that way. And then it was actually when I started to think, maybe if I'm going to be a navigator, then obviously I need to, do a navigators race like the ocean race. And while I was working with the French America's Cup team, actually K Challenge, I guess that was in 2004. The opportunity came up for ABN AMRO 2, which was going to be an under 30 boat. So I figured that if I was a navigator, then I should get involved and try and do an ocean race.
It's a dynamic that I'm really fascinated in, being a navigator, and what it's like when things go right and what it's like when things go wrong. Because that old saying is that if a boat wins, it's because of good crew work, and if it loses, it's because of bad navigation. And every armchair fan of the ocean race will say, oh, look, that boat's behind because they didn't get the shift, or they went the wrong way of the weather. For you, do you feel that? Do you feel that you have an unfair amount of pressure on the navigator's shoulders, or is that something that you're like, no, this is why I'm here. I like this amount of scrutiny.
It's interesting actually, because obviously, the first 2 races I did with ABN AMRO and then Telefonica as a navigator, and then in 11-12 I wasn't, and it was actually really enjoyable, quite refreshing to just get up, sail as hard as you can for 4 hours, and then go back to bed again. But I think at the end of that campaign, I certainly did miss the sort of responsibility of navigating and sort of being really central in what's going on and what's happening and all that sort of stuff. So I guess, I enjoyed the race. I did not navigating, but I certainly think I've sort of sought out that responsibility and that pressure. And I really enjoy it. It's a great spot in the boat to be, because you're involved in so many different things, and it sort of covers such a wide range of sort of skills and areas and all of that sort of stuff. It's yeah, I find it really interesting. And, especially now we're back into development boats as well. It's good. It's really, yeah, I mean, I love it. It's great. But I guess one of my strengths, I think, as a navigator, and certainly sort of put me in quite good stead in the last couple of races, is that people see me as someone that they can drag up on deck and put on the wheel and do a bit of sailing. So I guess it's, I didn't get into sailing to spend all day on a computer. So I actually very much value the time I get to do on deck and sail and all of that. And actually sort of moving into the IMOCAs, it's sort of great to be one of the key sailors, as well as the guy responsible for looking at the weather and the strategy and all that sort of stuff.
I can definitely see why it's so rewarding when it goes right. But the interesting thing for me is that if a trimmer is making a few small mistakes, you're going to be going, 0.1 of a knot slower, and maybe the rest of the crew won't pick up on it. It'll, you just sort of get diluted in. Whereas if a navigator makes a couple of small mistakes, it might be okay, it might not be okay. And, this is where, unfortunately, I have to bring up a couple of things. So Telefonica Blue, I think you know what I'm going to mention, but I think that there's a really interesting experience that I think all navigators have to sort of wrestle with, is that what happens if the very small mistake that maybe you didn't make, but it's on your shoulders as the navigator. What happens if you do that, and can you sort of, bounce back from it? So you know what I'm talking about. For anybody that wasn't there watching that race, what happened as you guys were on that final leg to Stockholm?
Yeah, well, exactly. I've done a heap of preparation for that leg as well, and knew where every rock was in the archipelago. And in that instance, we obviously hit that rock, and it was only about a metre wide. We clipped it with a dagger board, and then the boat rounded up, and the bulb landed square on top of this 1.5 metre high rock. And eventually, we had to get dragged off. It was, probably not my finest hour as a navigator, but certainly one I've learned from. But at the end of the day, in that case, we sort of knew where the rock was, and the course we were on was good, and I went to help with some stacking and all of that, and then I came back when we'd sort of moved a few degrees, I guess, as was always the case, and we literally must have just clipped it, in the moment it was absolutely soul destroying, and I think afterwards I pretty much shut myself in the hotel room for a few days, turned off all social media, and made sure Maria, who was my wife, who was also our logistics manager, made sure that made sure my credit card was in the hands of the shore crew, which were working 24/7, so they could have a good party when we left. And but that was that. But no, I mean, it's I obviously felt terrible, and felt terrible for the team, and it was difficult, and especially as on that campaign, I was one of the younger guys on the boat. I was still, I think I was only 30 years old at that point, and on my second race. But you learn from your mistakes, and they always sort of give you experience, make you stronger, and hopefully a little bit wiser. And sort of 5 races in, looking at my 6th now, it's all these experiences I think that's got me to the point where I am today. So I'd obviously rather have not hit that rock, but but maybe I'm a better navigator for it now. So we'll chalk it all up to experience. Well,
somebody has to stand up. Somebody has to take the responsibility of those high pressure positions. There's going to be mistakes. It's going to have to be somebody. If I can ask one more question on it, it was fascinating, I think, how everybody could empathize with being that person who didn't, call the boat up a little bit more. Or, like you say, split second, 1 or 2 degrees, that was it. Because you're leading, everybody's in a line behind you, and all the boats behind you go, oh, and they all come up. It could have been anyone. And I remember Ken Reed, and you guys were in the fight for second with Puma, and him saying, as he was sort of sailing past, looking back and going, I know there are competitors, but that is totally unfair.
I don't care if there are competitors or not. That is not right.
I remember that there was a quote from Bauer Becking, and him saying, it's happened, we made a mistake. We're all pretty cut up about it. I think the person who's most sorry is SiFi. He said sorry about 1,000 times, but we're a team and it happens. I'm really intrigued, if you don't mind me asking, what what did he do in that situation with you? Because everything that you've described about feeling terrible and all the rest of it, whether it's 100% your fault or not your fault, you're always going to feel like that as a navigator. What did the team do around you then?
No, I mean, yeah, everyone just, were very supportive and said, just put it past you. Let's go on. Just keep going, carry on. And, and that was it really. This sort of, there was support. There was no chat about, blame or, we didn't really, it didn't even need debriefing. It was kind of like everyone's looking forward from this point, it's happened. Let's strike a line under it and crack on. And, we got the boat fixed. The shore crew did a pretty amazing job of getting us on, and we all got on the boat, and we were behind, but we raced hard all the way to Stockholm, which was good. And, and then we, put a good effort in the following leg. So, it was tough. It was tough very personally, and I sort of kind of took it on the chin a bit, but no, everyone around me was very supportive, Bauer and all the other crew actually, but there was sort of no mention of blame or what if or, anything like that. It was just, let's just keep looking forward, do the best job we can in the legs we got remaining.
I can imagine that, things like that happen from, all those months of building that team and kind of building that respect. And that understanding of, what the other person's position is like, which is why it's interesting that you mentioned that, the next edition that you did do, you were in that trimming role. How much has that helped your ability to run the numbers, feed the performance to the team and sort of, get them to do what you need the boat to do tactically? Understanding, look, I know what it's like to be on that watch, to be a trimmer, to be sort of chasing those numbers. Is that a useful skill to have as a navigator?
Yeah, I think absolutely. No, it's very, it's easy to get too sucked into the theoretical and what the numbers say and all of that. And I'd need to start this course or do this course or this wind angle, but sometimes you can't, or sometimes it's slow or doing something else is faster. So, I think one of the keys to doing a good job at navigating is being really in tune with the performance of the boat, what's possible. Can you sell your numbers? Can you not? Is the CState doing something funny, or is there less wind or more wind than we thought, or and all of these little factors make a difference, and that kind of all goes into how you deal with the short term. So no, I think really it does make a big difference. I think being in tune with what's going on deck, and it's actually really nice. The race we did with Abu Dhabi, I was obviously involved in the watch system as well, and sort of did 4 on 4 off like the rest of the guys. Sometimes it was 4 on, then another 4 on when it got busy in the race. But that's by virtue of being a navigator and the kind of how life works. But getting on deck and getting on the wheel and all of that is always really good for clearing your head as well. I mean, I've spoken about it a lot with the guys I've been in the team with. I think there's definitely pros and cons for being in and out of a watch, and actually being in a watch for a bulk of the race is actually quite good, I think, and actually helps my navigating quite a lot. So no, it was I think being part of the sailing is really important. So
in terms of you sound like you prefer to be involved in that sailing in the watch, as you say. What about in terms of the decision navigationally? Do you prefer to have 1-2 people that you can throw some ideas around, or do you prefer to be, look, the buck stops with me, I'm deciding which way we go?
It very much depends on the situation, I think. It's always good to have a good discussion and a bit of a dialogue. And I think, with Abu Dhabi, that's one thing that always worked really well with Ian. We'd always have a really good discussion, and he'd always be really good at throwing out the sort of what ifs and being devil's advocate. I know he likes to do the devil's advocate. So, he was always very good at that. And I think that actually meant we missed very little. We were always on top of the situation. So it's always good to have a discussion. But then there are times when you see something and you feel very strongly about it, and you have to say that we've got to do this, for these reasons or whatever. So it sort of depends a bit on the situation. There's always a bit of ebb and flow, but there's always times where you're very certain that you have to do something or something's critical. You've got to jibe now, you've got to tack now, and I think as a navigator you've got to be have the authority to say that or call it or be definite. I think sometimes if you hesitate, sometimes no decision's worse than the wrong decision. So it's kind of dictated by the situation you're in. But no, I think it's obviously nice to bounce ideas off people and have a good discussion. But sometimes when you got to do something, you just got to put your best foot forward and do it.
Let's talk about your approach then to the 2014-15 one. The addition that you guys, like I say, I mean, it was a really strong performance. But one of the things that I think is remarkable about it, or maybe not that remarkable when you look at the scoreline from the last edition, the winning boat didn't win that many legs. And you were quoted as saying that from the outset, your plan was to be consistent, maybe even conservative in how you were sort of approaching it. Why did you arrive at that was the way to go? The small things. Let's play this one safe.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it was always the philosophy of the team. We kind of looked at it and said, if we can try and podium every leg, then we're probably in pretty good shape. And that was always our goal. We sort of always were looking to make sure we're in the top pack, didn't take too much risk, didn't do anything stupid or anything like that. And actually, by virtue of the fact that we had a great team and we had really good boat speed, and that made that job all the much easier. I mean, it's very well being a great navigator, but your job is made a million times easier by having a fast boat. And even though it was one design and the performance between the boats is more similar, we were quick, and in certain conditions we were really quick with Abu Dhabi, which we could often turn to our advantage. So and then when you're fast, it does allow you to be a bit more conservative. But yeah, I mean, our philosophy as a team and sort of our philosophy sort of navigating and strategically, and I often discuss this with Marcel and Chris Bedford, who helped me on the shore, was it was the sort of mentality about staying in the peloton and staying in the lead group, not doing anything too risky, not making too many mistakes. And then when if you're in that front group all the way through the race, there'll be an opportunity where maybe you can go for the victory, you can win it. But often you see these races, and especially with the one design where everyone's so close, is everyone travels around in a pretty tight pack, and then someone will break something or someone do something risky and I'll fall off the back, and then the pack's a little bit smaller, and it kind of gets whittled down as you go through the race course. And yeah, I guess our sort of plan was always to try and just not be one of the boats that gets whittled down and be in that last little pack, and then hopefully have the opportunity to win. And as it worked out, actually, probably two of the legs that I wanted to win the most, we actually managed to win, which was leg one into Cape Town and the big Southern Ocean leg. So it was a nice result.
We talk a lot about the one design, and we talk a lot about some of the things that have changed and how that would change how navigators would approach things and sort of your role. One of the things that doesn't come up in conversation that much, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it has been a bit of a step change, has been the AIS on the boats. So everyone has to be broadcasting under AIS, which means as a navigator, normally if you were within a good close contact with another boat, you'd be able to go, well, we're pointing a little higher, pointing a little lower. Am I right in saying that AIS gives you more ability to compare and contrast with the fleet now?
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, yeah, the first race we did with the 65s was the first race that we had AIS on all the time. And, you got like 8 miles of range, sort of best case probably we had with the 65s. And yeah, when you're close to a boat, you can, we have all the averages there on the screen. You can see who was fast over 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And it's a very useful tool, but you have to sort of learn to use that tool. And I also know it can be, I think sometimes when people are driving a trimming and working hard on deck, they don't like too much scrutiny. Getting told that they're faster or slower every 2 minutes can be quite stressful for them. So, and it's also very true that, when we do two boat testing, you line up however many meters apart and you might be 50 meters apart. And then after a couple of minutes, you decide you're in different breeze and you've got to restart the test again. So you have to sort of take all that AIS data with a pinch of salt. But it is a really useful tool about evaluating your performance and making sure you're always doing the best thing. Sort of when there's a persistent trend, you have to react to it or do something. So it's certainly been a game changer. And it probably, because you can see the other guys, and you can see their mode, it probably sort of steers everyone to sort of stick together a little bit more.
Well, that was kind of what I was wondering, because obviously the first time that the 65s came round, everyone was getting incredibly excited about these unbelievably close finishes. And then in the last edition, the second time of the 65s, what seemed close in 2014-15 was huge gaps. I mean, the last edition we had boats finishing, famously within boat lengths at Newport, but almost every leg it was a couple of hours and you'd get a whole bunch finishing. Is it just the AIS? Is it the one design? Is it, like you said, that gamble, I don't want to gamble too much. Why have we seen the fleets get closer and stick to similar tracks?
I think the one design is one element why everybody sort of sticks together a bit more. I mean, I guess when we were racing in the 70s or whatever, everyone had slightly different polars, they had different sails, the boats had different strengths, so you kind of have to do your routing and sail the course to your strengths. Whereas with the 65s, essentially everyone sort of had the same strengths and the same weaknesses as a boat. So it kind of herds, like the routing probably steers everyone a bit closer together. But at the same time, it's still amazing that, you'd race for days and days and then, you'd all run out of wind and everyone ended up in the same part of the ocean again. And you'd all start again. It did amaze me sometimes that it happened that often. We'd all end up regrouping.
Is that frustrating?
and often things get complicated. You can sail quite happily for weeks on end in the ocean in good breeze, and then as soon as you get close to land, things get complicated. You run out of wind, and then all of a sudden everyone's on top of each other, and you start a race again in the last 5 miles. So certainly made for some exciting finishes.
I'm not an offshore sailor. I've never had the stomach for it. I've never had the stamina for it. I'm all about the inshore, and I get frustrated when that happens on an inshore course. When when you've invested sort of 2-3 weeks in this lead, and then it evaporates because of a wind change, do you find that frustrating?
Yeah. No, yeah, for sure. And I think you feel the stress as well of just, when you're trying to hold a lead or hold a position, and you've got people breathing down your neck, I think sort of subconsciously it's quite stressful. It's always quite a relief when you finish a leg and you get on shore and you don't have that feeling of like someone breathing down your neck the whole time.
With the stress, so one of the things that we get to enjoy a little bit when we're following the race is this position reports. And, because of the OBRs on board the boats, we get to see that moment where typically the navigators, sometimes the skippers, will come up and say, right, we've been performing like this, they've been performing like that, we're losing, we're winning, whatever. And you can see the reaction from the sailors' faces. On that thing about stress and trying to get the best out of your sailors, how often do you twist the info that you're feeding your sailors? How often do you maybe sugarcoat it? Maybe just flat out ignore some bits, or do you always go, honesty is the best policy?
I don't think you can sort of twist the numbers too much, but it's always in a context. And you can, there's a lot in the delivery, shall we say.
Do you find yourself warning? I mean, I'm guessing that as a crew, you already have an inkling as to whether you are below your goal speed or whatever. You know whether you're going to get a bad sked.
Yeah, I think so. I think and I think the delivery kind of gives it away whether you're happy or not. I think if you run up on decks, all emotional, jumping up and down, saying you had a terrible sked, then everyone's going to sort of react to that. So I've always tried to make sure that sort of the delivery is fairly objective and making sure people understand the context. I think if people feel kind of clued into what's happening, when we should be gaining and maybe when we should, when we are going to just naturally lose miles or whatever, then it kind of makes it a bit easier. But I think one of the things I've learned with doing all these races is for me personally, it's very important not to get on the emotional roller coaster and every sked come in and be like elation or despair. If everyone's just, if every sked's just okay, that's all good. And I think that sort of reflects on how you tell the other people. So I've certainly said with people who do get on the emotional roller coaster and then would deliver a position report and then everyone else would come down and go, how bad was it? No, it's fine.
It's interesting hearing those little skills and the interpersonal skills maybe, but some of the big navigational skills as well, because you have done 5 ocean races. That is a lot. What do you look back, at that very first race you did in 5-6, and what do you go, man, I mean, I didn't know this, I didn't know that, can you see what was missing in your toolbox back then?
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. I'm amazed when I think about it now and doing that. And we did some pretty smart things in that race, but I think about it and I just it's amazing how much more experience I've got now, especially in terms of the weather. I think, I think I've learned so much about the meteorology and the fine detail and all that sort of stuff over the course of 5 races. But yeah, it's amazing to think now that I managed to do as well as I did with ABN AMRO based on what I knew at the time, if you see what I mean. But that said, we had a great team, and I was actually, and back to that race, I was really, really lucky for my first race to be in that team and working with a great group. There was no better environment than for someone to come in and learn to be a ocean race navigator than that. We had Stan Honey on the other boat, who's got a pretty stellar record. Mike Quilter was like helping us on the shore, who I think is the only navigator to have won the race twice, maybe. And then Ken Campbell from Commanders were helping us, and we went around the world and on all the stopovers. There'd be 4 of us in our little container working together, and it was a great adventure and opportunity, and I'm very grateful to those guys for obviously teaching me everything I needed to get around the first time. So,
well, and it hasn't stopped yet. So let's talk about the next edition, 2022. So this is going to be a little bit different because you're lining up to get going on one of the fully crewed IMOCAs. In terms of sailing skill, I mean, we've been talking to some of the sailors, and it's been interesting to hear about, how rough and ready and sort of gut-wrenching the ride can be on a foiling IMOCA. In terms of navigationally, is there a fundamentally different way that you think you approach it?
No, I think you sort of approach the navigation in the same way. But yeah, it's definitely hard. It's not like you can sit in the nav station and be comfortable and sort of focus on what you're doing. I think so some of the stuff I've been sort of trying to figure out in the last few months is actually like where you sit on the boat and how you spend the time trying to focus on the weather is because it is it's amazing. You get shaken about all over the place, and actually downstairs in the boat they're much smaller to what you used to, and there's not really space for nice dedicated nav station areas. But I mean, the fundamentals are still the same. But obviously it's more of a bumpy ride, and there's less people, and consequently you're sort of busier from that perspective. But I mean, the fact that it's going to go back to a development boat will change things. And I think where we got to with the 65s was basically foot hard on the floor all the time. Whereas with the 60s, they're powerful boats, and we will be able to break them if we push too hard. So actually having that skill to know when to push the boat hard, and know when to throttle back and look after the boat is going to be super important.
When you go back and look at like the old Whitbreads, and it's fascinating to see how the route has changed. And like all purists, you go, let's bring it back to just 4 legs, and then you realize, well, the boats are so fast now. The 65s, the 70s, the Whitbread 60s, they're so quick that the route has to change and the way you sail change. Back in 74, you're looking behind you for the weather because it's chasing you. Now we're going fast enough that we're actually trying to, we're getting into things in front of us. Is the IMOCAs in the 60s, is that enough of a speed jump over the 65s that again, you've got some different moves on the chessboard, or is it still similar to the 65s? It's just a slightly faster?
Yeah, I'm not sure we're like quite into sort of multi-hull territory where we can like chase down a weather system yet, like the old teams can. I mean, they've got an interesting problem now when they go around the world is that, they struggle to stay in one weather system. Like the key to getting a good round the world record used to be get on a good weather system and carry all the way across the Southern Ocean. And those guys now can actually outrun one. So then they start to run out of breeze. I mean, I don't think we're quite there yet with the 60s, but it's going to be an interesting challenge dealing with the foils, especially. I mean, we've seen it's been interesting watching the beginning of the Vendée Globe, and John Le Cam in an old boat with no foils has had a much more direct route at a slower speed, and is only just now out of the top 3 positions, which has been really, really impressive. And it shows that even with a lot of speed, you can cover a lot more miles, but it doesn't necessarily get you down the course quicker. So understanding the performance of the boat and actually in some cases how fast to go or how much to utilize the foils might be important. It's going to be it's certainly going to be an interesting challenge. And the other thing that the foils sort of throw up is CState. It has a massive effect on performance. In flat, you see all this footage of them the IMOCAs doing the Azimuth Challenge, and they're all flying up in the air in perfectly flat water. But it's a very different situation when you're out in the middle of the ocean, and how fast you go is very much dictated by sea state. So there might be a case where you're trying to avoid big sea state because you can actually go faster. And it's also the case as well that you can most likely go faster in a lot less wind. So there might be the opportunity to sort of sail a few more miles, but at slightly more, I won't say more, that much more comfort because it's pretty uncomfortable all the time. But more miles and slightly less wind in slightly less hairy conditions might be preferable to the shortest route.
Really interesting you mentioned CState. I was going to bring it up because I got a chance to speak to Juan Kuriamjan, 1K, and he was talking about his experience with the IMOCAs and how differently stacked and balanced they needed to be if you were running square or running 45 degrees or down with the waves. As a navigator, do you think, oh great, I've got more opportunities here, I've got more things to worry about, or is it a case of God, I've got a bigger headache?
Yeah, I mean, like figuring out all this stuff with CState and how much it affects your routing. It's certainly like a headache at the moment. We're sort of thinking about how we're going to solve that problem, but I mean, hopefully it's a headache that we can, in time, turn to our advantage. And working with 11th Hour Racing now, we're obviously sailing already, and we've maybe got a bit of a jump on the rest of the fleet. So, time spent figuring that out and doing a good job of that, hopefully it might translate into an advantage on the race course, just sort of knowing the boat a bit better, the potential and what you can achieve and when. So yeah, all these things that are a headache are also a sort of an opportunity for an advantage. So I think it's important to see them like that. But yeah, maybe it'd be simpler if CState wasn't a problem. But
what about the modelling? I mean, we hear so much about all the different wind models, and I remember when the race was in Abu Dhabi, I think Ian was telling me about, some special modelling for, with the wind round there left over from the America's Cup and all this kind of stuff. But people don't talk so much about wave modelling. As a navigator, obviously, you look at this all the time. Is the CState prediction as reliable as, say, the wind?
Probably not. And actually, it's funny. And I've spent an awful lot of time looking at the wind, and I've generally been less concerned about CState, to the point where often, only if it's a problem, I'll sort of look at the forecast. But so all of a sudden now it's like another thing we have to start evaluating a lot more and considering a lot more. So I think, I'll probably be able to tell you a lot more in about 2 years' time when I figured all this out. But certainly it's rising up the priority list, looking at how the models deal with the CState. And the interesting thing about CState is it can help you or it can hinder you, and it can come from all sorts of different directions. I mean, we were sailing in Biscay upwind with a 6-meter swell following us the other day, so we're surfing at over 20 knots at times. It's an interesting challenge, and certainly one that's going to require a bit of energy to figure out probably.
Well, yeah, okay, that kind of energy. And what about physical energy as well? Because there's less people on the IMOCAs, and I wouldn't in any way claim to be physically fitter than Juan Villa or KP. I'm sure they could all floor me if they wanted to, but with less people on an IMOCA, is it more important that somebody in the navigation role is physically up to the task of trimming in a way that maybe they wouldn't need to be if they were on a 65?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, yeah. And just one of the big things with the IMOCA boats is injury prevention. You get slammed and bashed around so much, and, even being in bed can be quite uncomfortable at times. and the potential for injury sort of exists, is ever present, if you see what I mean. So, I mean, I think it is important to be fit. And, as a team, we're spending a lot of time and energy on making sure we're fit and flexible and avoiding injury, and it's as important for me as a navigator as anyone else. And it's funny, actually, sort of thinking back to when we first went to One Design, I think that sort of, as a navigator at that point, I kind of saw an advantage in trying to be fitter or fitter than the others or healthier or whatever it is. Just, obviously the fitter you are, the quicker you recover, potentially the less sleep you need. And I've always sort of thought about it in the context of, being able to make decisions under pressure or when you're sort of in sort of slightly suboptimal state. And then you listen to all the studies about how you're actually legally drunk after missing X amount of hours of sleep, and how less creative or worse a decision making people are when they're sleep deprived. And it's pretty much the state you exist in the whole time when you're racing offshore. So just trying to sort of have that level of fitness so you can be a little bit better in those situations, I think is really, really important.
And we're going to hear a lot about sleep, aren't we, from the 60s? That seems to be another thing that's pretty hard to do on this boat that's bucking around.
Yeah. Sleep or lack of. Yeah, no, it's difficult. And I mean, obviously the Vendée guys, we're going to see some pretty impressive pace from them at times, I think. But they sort of, I think they're looking to look after their boat and get around the world. Whereas I think whilst we're going to have to, measure our performance and not destroy our boat trying to go flat out the whole time, we are going to be pushing pretty hard. And when the Vendée guys are sleeping, the pilot's driving and just sort of taking care of things or whatever. And when we're trying to sleep on an IMOCA, there's two guys on deck trying to wring every last ounce of performance out of it. So it's not always that conducive to sleep.
It will certainly make for a very interesting next edition. As somebody who's done 2 on the 65, and that 65 being sort of lined up as not in any way diminishing anybody sailing that 65, but there is also a nice opportunity with the rule in terms of the diversity of gender, age. It's going to be easier for people to jump on board a 65 than it is for the 60. What would you, for somebody who says, I want to do the 65s, you were a young guy, you sort of got your foot in the door, kicked it open, got yourself there. Is there any sort of little bits of advice to give somebody who wants to try and chase down a role in the next race?
Yeah, I mean, I really hope that the 65s do present some new opportunities for guys, because it has the race has always been really difficult to get into, and it is a bit of a club. You see the same guys in different shirts every 3 or 4 years time, and we all kind of move around, and it's not for nothing. Experience is obviously vitally important, but it is nice to see new people getting into the race and opportunities into the race. And I think one thing the race has always lacked is a sort of a pathway into it. So hopefully the 65s will provide that. But it's still difficult in terms of sort of advising someone on how they get into it. It's even getting to that 65 stage is kind of difficult. It's amazing when sort of getting immersed in a IMOCA world. You look to what's going on in France, and there's mini transats and the Figaros and class 40s, and they will sort of graduate up to the IMOCA, and there seems to be a pathway which I guess the ocean race lacks a little bit. But I guess I'm sort of testament to the fact that you can get there through big boat sailing and trying to meet the right people and putting yourself forward and actually there's plenty of good guys out there who follow that pathway. So it's really about getting out there, getting out racing and get on the big boats, take your opportunities. I mean, I think always try and be the least experienced guy on the boat. That was always sort of kind of one of my mantras. Unfortunately, the ripe age of 42 now, it's pretty difficult.
Oh, Simon, thank you very much. It's really, like you say, it's fascinating to hear that it's possible. It's not guaranteed, but it's possible with, asking the right people and, being keen enough. It is possible. And, look how far you've come. I know we're going to see you in the next edition. Fingers crossed. You mentioned that, there was one other navigator that, the only navigator to win the race twice. Perhaps maybe we can start setting some new records with someone like yourself. Thank you very much for talking to me tonight.
Thanks, Noel. Great to speak to you.
My thanks to Simon for talking us through being a navigator in the ocean race and also the twists and turns in his career, as well as taking time out from campaigning for the next edition of the ocean race. And we're going to be taking a little bit of a Christmas break now. We'll be back in the new year with another season of Off Watch. But in the meantime, you can subscribe to our channel and flick through and enjoy any of the amazing stories that we've had laid out for us by the stars of the races, past and future, all available for you in our back catalogue. And we'll be seeing you in the new year with plenty more amazing stories to come.